Welcome to High Heels in the High Country. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. Farming produces an amazing array of challenges. There's floods, there's snow, high winds, you name it. The challenges keep hitting the rural communities, but luckily there's some rural women who love a challenge. Survivors of the earthquake-ravaged suburbs will always remember the day the Farmy Army came to town. Following behind the tractors and farm trucks were a battalion of rural women armed with something just as vital as shovels and wheelbarrows for carting away silt. It was food, lots of it, for residents without power, refrigeration or the means to cook. Heading up the catering battalion was Helen Heddle, who took on the unenviable job of finding the food and making sure it got to where it was needed most.
Yes, well, that phone call that I said yes to 2 days after the quake was, I had no idea what I was going into, and none of us did actually. None of us who were involved in the whole thing had any idea what we were going to have to. And it's a seat of the pants thing, which farmers are good at. They're good at just running with, you know, the weather today is such and such, right, well, I'm not doing that program, I'm doing this, and we'll change that and we'll do this, and, you know, having to flick out the next program without being structured into something. And I knew a lot of the people. I was very lucky. I mean, I've worked a lot through Canterbury and I've got a lot of contacts, and it was easy. And a very supportive rural women's group behind me. I've been an individual member many years. Very supportive University Women's Group, and the spinners and the weavers and federated farmers and all the stud breeders, and, you know, on it goes. And when you suddenly sit down and think how many different groups of people you know, those people all put their hands up and turned up.
It was like a war zone.
Yes, it's the closest I think that we will ever come to war, I hope. Coming across Blenheim Road at night with those tanks rumbling past in front of you, going to the security zone.
Within no time at all, Helen and her battalion of farming women were on the front line supplying food to the frightened and starving residents of the eastern suburbs.
I think one of the projects we did later on in the February quake was we took over the Salvation Army effort of dishing out meals to the east. After 11 days, everybody was very, very tired in both the Sally Army and ourselves. They asked us if we could do it because they just couldn't man it any longer. So we took it on, and I put out a call for drivers, four-wheel drive drivers, who hadn't been involved in the Farmy Army because of one circumstance or another. And I had this wonderful crew of people that turned up, and we took those meals out, 700 at a time, to different areas in league with the police and Crime Watch out there. And we met a lot of people that they were white, they were shell-shocked. They hadn't had a cooked meal for 9 days, and all these stories. And the men, particularly in our team, were very humbled. And those are the memories that you're left with, really, and you wonder what's happened to those people now. But I mean, things didn't stop then. There was just a few meals that we took them.
A few meals, there were 700 people being fed. Where did the food come from?
Well, we had amazing, and we went through 5.5 tonne of meat. You know, I was in charge of sourcing meat. It wasn't hard. Alliance was an amazing supporter. Then we had small suppliers like Harris Meats at Cheviot. Brian Harris and his wife would turn up with their truck every day with meat for us and the shovels, and they'd go out on a work gang all day, and that was from Cheviot day after day. And we had lots of instances of that type of thing. All the butcheries in town, all the meat people. The food was not difficult to come by. I think of Hummingbird. I mean, I'm going to drink Hummingbird coffee forever. She turned up with a coffee machine for us, and we had to take coffee back. And that's criminal, isn't it? But, you know, it's that specialness.
Helen and her troops fed hundreds of hungry families for nearly a month before their emergency efforts were wound down.
There comes a time when everybody gets so tired that you actually can't put one foot in front of the other, you can't get your lateral thoughts going. When we came to clean up, when we said after, 20 days I think, everybody was just too tired. They mechanically could do it, but mentally we're just too tired. I mean, I had police friends staying here for 2 months during that time, and I had people in house buses on the back lawn and what have you, and I'd come home and I couldn't talk to anybody. I'd come home at 9 or 10 at night and the dogs would get a bit of a cuddle and I'd go to bed, and I'm up again at 4:30 into Copeland's to try and bribe another 20 crates of bread out of them and pay for it to get into the showgrounds by 6:30 to get the breakfast going, and it was that type of constancy. Very good for one to put oneself in that now and again.
Many people were both impressed and bewildered by the willingness of rural folk to volunteer so much time to help out city residents. Helen thinks that people naturally want to contribute to a common cause.
I think sometimes of those wonderful women that turned up at the door with food at the showgrounds, and a lot of them were city women, and they said, we've got aprons and we're not moving, give us a job. And there'd be the ones who weren't so ambulant. So we had a great team sitting out at a table peeling spuds all day. They had a wonderful time, but they peeled thousands of potatoes. Another team wrapped all the baking, that sort of, and it is that channeling of energies. And everybody wants to do things. I mean, why did we have so much food turning up on the carousels at the airport from everywhere? And people, carpet layers from Napier came down way after the quake. And Peter and Sarah and I were taking them out to dinner in pubs and things because it was way past the Farmy Army. They spent a whole week working in the east, those guys. Why do people do it? It's a bit like the bravery thing, isn't it? It's like watching Mike Brooklands and his team in the CTV building. Nobody really knows what drives some people to walk into something and give it a go, and others to walk away from it because they know that it's not in their psyche, but they have other strengths in other areas, and it's a case of picking up and channeling that.
And I guess in the country, emergency services aren't a phone call away, are they?
No. I always remember at Cairns Bay, you never rang 111 because if you did, it would block all your phone lines. So you had a pyramid ringing list of your neighbours, and you'd ring 1 or 2, and then that pyramid would get, and they would be up there to help before the emergency. And it's a case of knowing who you can call on first. We've all had our fires in the rural areas. We had a fire up at the top of Sandown, and I think we fed 96 firefighters at 12:30 at night. It was quite a party.
Helen believes that rural New Zealand is well prepared to cope with disasters and provide help for city folk when they need it too.
We've got a fantastic structure in place in New Zealand in terms of community support when you compare it with other areas of the world. But it's just a group of farmers or students or wherever who see the chance that they can add to the impetus of those already structured groups and go in there and get the wheelbarrows out and the text machine's going and the pot's on and
get the job done.
Yeah, give it a go. And I think too that you look at people like the 5 or 6 at the top of the student army. I looked at them one day and thought they've all got a rural base, those kids, except one. I couldn't believe it, but they'd all come out of the rural area. I mean, they are streets ahead in terms of leadership, those guys. And I think Sam Johnson and his team did a very fine job. And so if the young can do it, by golly, the rest of us can get ourselves into gear and do it too.
Heavy traffic can make travel equally as torturous these days, so it's a relief to know that Meads has been offering travellers a comfortable break from the tedium of travel since it opened its doors.
I have a copy of the original menu from 1934, and whilst it would have been part of it would have been the tastes at the time, one of the dishes was bread, scones and a pie. And I guess those staples of good, filling, hearty, cheap fare were what people were eating in those days.
In days gone by, travel in rural areas was long, slow and quite laborious. But nowadays, of course, it's a lot quicker and a lot smarter. However, luckily, there's still some women who are keeping the art of rural hospitality alive.
Back in the days when the only crossing over the Rakaia River was a combined road-rail bridge, weary travellers must have viewed Meads tea rooms in Rakaia as a welcome respite for the torment of travel. Heavy traffic can make travel equally as torturous these days, so it's a relief to know that Meads has been offering travellers a comfortable break from the tedium of travel since it opened its doors.
The cafe's actually been trading continually on this site for 77 years on the 25th of June. But it had its history 2 years prior to that when Mrs. Meads opened a little cafe in a tin shed at the end of what was then being constructed as the second bridge over the Rakaia River.
Which is now the road bridge.
It is now the road bridge, and those 2 years were so successful in the tin shed, where her main sales were tobacco and tea for the men working on the bridge, that she moved to the site in 1936.
Michelle is one of many people who visited the tea rooms over the years. Her memories of stopping for refreshments were what prompted her to buy the business when it came up for sale.
I trace my memories to this business back to when I was 19 and I first got my heavy trade licence. I was very involved with horses and used to travel quite a lot in a very funny old 1949 Bedford truck called Bertha, and every trip south would always involve a stop at Meads. So we would come in here, we would get our pie, we would get our sandwiches, and in those days Laurie Cromie was running the garage next door and we still had the Bowsers, so it was pie and sandwich at Meads, and then it was petrol at Laurie's, and then we would wind our way, and it really was winding in a 1949 Bedford down to Dunedin or wherever we were competing. So I knew the business from back then, and when I heard it was on the market, I thought it's a wonderful location. And I came down, I looked at it, and made a pretty quick decision to buy it.
Michelle inherited more than just memories when she bought the business.
I have a copy of the original menu from 1934, and whilst it would have been part of it would have been the tastes at the time, one of the dishes was bread, scones and a pie. And I guess those staples of good, filling, hearty, cheap fare were what people were eating in those days.
There's obviously still a spot in New Zealand for a very traditional formica tabled, chromed, chaired type fare.
The tables and chairs are probably one of the most talked about aspects of this business. They polarise people. People either love them or hate them. There is not a week goes by without people ask me if they can buy the tables and chairs. And when I bought the business 4 years ago, I inherited a list of people with a wish list that they wanted to buy the tables and chairs. They are nostalgic like the rest of the business. People think back to their childhoods when formica tables and chairs like this, they were in every kitchen. But I'm told that I actually have the deluxe model. The ones with the double curved legs apparently were very upmarket, whereas the single-legged ones were the more everyday. So I've learned a tremendous amount about formica tables since I've been here. But yeah, there's a lot of history, and as I say, from the outside, the business has really not changed very much at all.
And yet it fits into modern taste.
It does. You know, I think people find that nostalgia is comfortable, and I think that's important. And, you know, we live in a changing world where fashions change very quickly, but fashions are a little bit different. You know, I remember when I was a child that fashions were it was either in or it was out, but things are much more eclectic these days. And while a very, very modern cafe will have its place, so will one with history like this.
With Michelle in charge, Mrs Mead's legacy is safe for another generation of passing travellers seeking refreshment and a break from their journeys along the South Island's main highway.
People who don't even know that there's a rhododendron nursery along here, they see the flowers in flower and they just drive up. We have a lot of camper vans, a lot of tourists. In fact, some people from India came here last spring, and India's where some rhododendrons are native. So they should have been seeing them all their life, but they've never seen anything like this before, because these are hybrid rhododendrons that have been created. And in India, the native ones aren't really as beautiful as the hybrids. So they came here and they were like kids in a candy shop. They just couldn't believe how beautiful these plants were.
One of the lovely things about rural women is their adaptability when it comes to helping out and building their own businesses. Emma went out and caught up with a lady who was selling to the country what she grows in her garden.
Tucked away beyond a small town called Rotherham is this unique business. Thousands and thousands of flowers plastering this backyard. Meet Marina Shearer, the owner of Rhodo Direct. She wanted to do something with her husband, who works here, their 1,500 hectare sheep and beef farm with his dad.
So there wasn't really a place for me on the farm, and I was actually quite relieved about that.
But after 15 years of marriage, was gardening the answer?
When we got married, we had this pact that we made with each other that there would be no garden, and we were both really excited about that. But there was something about moving into the little cottage on our farm that just screamed Buxus, iceberg roses, and from there, the rest is history.
That history filling 60 hectares, with 50 different types of rhododendrons in every colour of the rainbow.
After 15 years of doing this, the nursery has expanded beyond our comprehension.
A job that keeps the couple busy, especially heading into the summer season.
Over spring, it's dawn till dusk every day. We can have up to 100 people here a day over spring. It's flat out. By the time Christmas comes, we're quite relieved. It's a bit of a rest, bit of a relax. And then once we're into autumn, we're getting ready for sending roadies all over New Zealand. We're sending plants out every day of the week. We have Saturdays off, but apart from that, there's orders coming in all the time.
But how did it get so big?
So this is where it all began, is it? Yeah, 15 years ago, this was Rhodo Direct. We built this area first and we're selling out of here. We expanded into this ginormous rectangle here, and the car park was right down the end. Totally outgrown this area now. This is our growing on area and our cuttings area. So most of these rhododendrons are sitting here because they're precious to us, and we take cutting material. Our baby plants go in there, and there's another store area at the back.
And from here they built this shade, but quickly outgrew that as well.
About 5 years ago, we decided that we needed a bigger structure. So my husband and his father got together and built that, basically to protect the roadies from the sun and the heat of summer, which is very hot here, and then from the snow. Roadies are actually really resilient to snow, but we thought that we needed to have somewhere where we could put a lot of plants and protect them from really heavy extreme snowfall. So we built that expecting that that was going to be our expansion, but then the rest of the nursery has kind of grown since then, and these big plants are, some of them are a metre and a half wide now, so they take quite a lot of room up.
And so these are very, very tall, and you ship these off, don't you?
Yeah, these go all over New Zealand. We use a fantastic freight company. They'll deliver them anywhere, and they'll go 10 at a time, no problem.
But where they travel has no limits.
We've sold them to the Chatham Islands and Great Barrier Island. They do go to some pretty extreme locations in New Zealand.
I should mention these are all organised in different colours and in no particular order. It's part of the psychology of gardening, something Marina knows all about. She has a degree from the University of Canterbury in psychology.
And it's really interesting, like watching the psychology of gardening when you see people coming here and they're either definitely one way or definitely the other. So half the customers are wandering around in the cottage garden, loving the fact that it's all really random over there, and half the people are over here and they don't even want to go over there because that just doesn't appeal, and those people over there don't like this. So it's a great thing to have two completely kind of different styles for people.
She also shares her words of wisdom at speaking engagements around New Zealand.
I've been speaking at Ellerslie over the last few years in the Hawk Galore marquee, just sharing with people my ideas about gardening with soul, gardening with passion, and just having the kind of garden that really pleases you.
The business that started as a hobby between newlyweds is now attracting people as they drive past.
People who don't even know that there's a rhododendron nursery along here, they see the flowers in flower and they just drive up. We have a lot of camper vans, a lot of tourists. In fact, some people from India came here last spring, and India's where some rhododendrons are native. So they should have been seeing them all their life, but they'd never seen anything like this before, because these are hybrid rhododendrons that have been created. And in India, the native ones aren't really as beautiful as the hybrids. So they came here and they were like kids in a candy shop. They just couldn't believe how beautiful these plants were.
With their backyard already packed to the brim with rhododendrons, it's hard to imagine where their business will expand to next.
And that's this week's High Heels in the High Country. Join us again when we introduce you to more amazing women doing things in the rural scene.